Hi, it's Judy. I have some exercises in watercolor today that you can modify based on your ideas and your skill level. You'll want watercolor paper because it is durable enough to support the mediums we will be using. Crayola and Prang both make great watercolors, or you can buy a higher-end watercolor. I will also be using a thin point Sharpie, a white gel pen, and brushes. This first exercise is a surface pattern exploring the tip of my brush. The brush tip will make a nice imprint on its own, and depending on how much pressure you apply, you will get a larger shape or a smaller shape. Water down your paint in the palette provided and explore making different shades of colors. Water is your friend in these explorations. Don't over fuss with your brush. This is a wet application, and while the paint is wet, you can drop in some other color and watch its effect in your shape. As you're exploring what your brush tip can do and the different shades you can create, don't become critical during this process. Just keep going forward. The fun thing about this exercise is that you can turn it into anything. The watercolor will dry in a very unique way due to the use of water with the color. And because the color is very susceptible to dirty water, I will be changing my water frequently. I've been creating flowers exploring my brush tip, but you can explore your brush tip making abstract shapes or anything you can think of. Watercolor should dry flat. Now dry, I'll use a Sharpie to create lines, designs, and patterns. I don't mind that the line does not conform with the shape of the watercolor. In fact, I think when some of the white from the page is included into the flower form, it is interesting, as well as letting some of the color expand outside of the line. I've tried to think of a few different ways to work with these flower forms, and as I do so, I will also expand into the background. I find working with watercolor to be very relaxing and calming. Make that your goal during these explorations. And I'll finish this piece up just by adding some spirals and leaves into the background. Watercolor is an affordable and versatile medium. It's also easy to pack up with a picnic and take out on a summer day. For the next exercise, I'll be using painter's tape, which is optional. If you don't have tape, you may paint geometric shapes. Watercolor will bleed, so if two wet shapes are touching, the colors will bleed into each other. As you blend colors in your palette to fill in the spaces, just make some colors that you really like. We will not use a lot of water in this application. If the watercolor is too wet, it will seep under the tape. I'll continue to fill in each of these sections. Use this opportunity to explore making colors. I will be using this as a base for some exploration of lines and designs. If you want, you can pre-plan your idea. You can use Zentangle designs or other patterns to inspire you. I'm going to use a technique similar to the Take a Line for a Walk, which I demonstrated in another tutorial. Once it is dried completely, I will remove the tape carefully, pulling it back at an angle. If the paper begins to tear, just approach it from the opposite direction. And now for the fun part, I'll start working with a design with Sharpie. You can pre-draw with pencil if you like. As I add to my design, I'm just going to go with the flow. I don't have a preconceived idea of what I'm going to create, and I'm just letting the idea happen as it comes. I'm using the fine point Sharpie. I'll also be using watercolor color pencils and a white gel pen to enhance my idea. Here are some lines and designs to help you with your idea. Don't feel like you need to finish your artwork in one sitting. It's nice to come back after you've had a little break and look at your ideas with a fresh eye. Once you have your idea created, thicken some lines, repeat some lines, and add design elements. I'm using Crayola watercolor color pencil. I'm dipping the color pencil tip into the water and applying it to the paper. I'm using the color pencil to create some accents, and what you'll notice is that the watercolor layer that we did first will start to fade into the background. As you're working on your art, it's important to take pause and to breathe and to observe your art and to notice what you like about it. Notice what's happening with the movement and color choices. Here I'm using the paintbrush to help activate the watercolor color pencil. I'll continue to fill in the desired spaces with colors, and then I'll use my white gel pen to create some accents. This is Pandafly white gel pen, and it came in a package with a silver and gold gel pen, and I'm having a lot of fun with them. I'm using the white on top of the widened black Sharpie line to create some accents. Take a moment to notice how widened lines attract your eye and darkened shapes control your eye's movement. This is part of your composition, and we created it, knowingly or not. In visual arts, composition is the placement of our stuff. The lines, the forms, the colors, all of these choices control how our eyes will move through the artwork. I've really been enjoying creating in this way, and here's one I did earlier. With our next exercise, we'll be doing wet on wet, and that means we'll be getting our paper wet first and then adding the watercolor. It is truly entertaining to watch this technique. I mean, how fun is that? I love watching the water pull the color. And sometimes I just drop water, like I am here, on top of the wet surface. And don't forget, all of this has to dry flat. Here I'm adding just a small bit of salt. The salt will create a very interesting discoloration in the final product. Once the area is dry, you can add your idea to it. There's so much you can do with a swirl that's blue, or whatever color you ended up going with. And here I've pre-drawn with pencil, and I'm outlining and adding design elements with Sharpie. I'm only drawing part of the ship because some of the ship is underwater. I will widen some of my lines and add dots or other design elements. Notice the discoloration of this blue wave, the random lights and darks created by the way the water absorbs the color, and the salt application also creates some beautiful, elegant discolorations. I'll use the white gel pen on the widened Sharpie lines. It also shows up nicely on the dry watercolor. I'll fill in the boat with a little bit of watercolor to create greater contrast against the blue wave. And then I'm going to use a wet circle of water to drop some paint in for a sun or a moon. I decided after it had dried that I wanted to add more texture to it to make it look like a moon. Here is another swirl I created, and I'll be transforming it into another wave by adding an octopus. I've pre-drawn the octopus lightly with pencil, and I'll use Sharpie and the Panda Fly white gel pen. I will widen some of the lines with the Sharpie. I will also add some lines to insinuate the water surface. As you're moving through your idea, you might find that things are not going the way you anticipated. I like to remind myself that art is like an adventure, going someplace that maybe I have never been before. And when going on an adventure, you're excited and you get ready for it. And sometimes on an adventure, things don't work out the way you had planned. Maybe on the way, your luggage is lost, or maybe on the way, you're bumped up to first class. In either scenario, we problem solve and move through it and have the experience. Remember to allow yourself to have your creative experience, because chances are something wonderful is waiting for you. I love the color purple I found for this octopus, and I used a little bit of white gel pen in the eye. To finish up this piece, I'm going to fill in the octopus form, and then I will add a little star into the background. You should be noticing through these exercises how the water will pull on the paint and move it without needing very much of your control at all. And I find that to be a beautiful quality in this medium. Finishing up with that gold star, and I feel pretty done with this. In this next exercise, I'll explore a landscape using watercolor and watercolor pencils, and I'll also use the Sharpie. You can see my light pencil line for creating a horizon line, a couple of mountains, and a tree. I'll bring two lines out from the horizon line, making them wavy and expanding them as they reach the bottom of the page. As I showed you in my chalk pastel tutorial, that creates an illusion of depth. The feeling that you can go into this landscape. I'll work with a wash, which is very watered down watercolor, and I'll activate the color pencil line. I'm creating a very wet surface. This allows for the color to blend and bleed in the surface. It will also be great when adding the watercolor color pencil. I'm imagining the light source coming from the right hand side, and therefore you see my mountains are shaded a little more on the left. In creating the illusion of depth, things that are closest to us or closest to the bottom of the paper will be larger or taller than things in the middle of the paper or in the background. Working with watercolor has such an elegant and beautiful way about it, and that's when we let the water be our partner in that creative process and not trying to fuss with it too much. You can achieve sweet and elegant watercolor pieces with 1 or 2 layers, and you can also build up several layers of watercolor to make quite exquisite pieces. I've let the watercolor dry, and I'll go back with my Sharpie to add design elements and lines to identify and enhance the landscape. I'm going to continue to develop the path and add some flowers and more watercolor. With this landscape, there's so many ways that it can be developed, and I'm going to try to keep it simple today. It can be fun to use a photo reference to work from, or as I mentioned earlier, watercolors transport nicely, and sit outside at your favorite spot and do some plein air watercolor exploration. As I finish this piece, the flowers I am adding will become smaller as they fade into the background. I've decided to add some clouds, and I will use a blue wash with cloud shapes that are smaller as they're closer to the horizon, that become larger as they're closer to the top of the paper. Again, that will help with my illusion of depth. Another awesome trick with watercolor is your paintbrush can absorb, and you can pull too much water or too much color out of an area that you feel is a little heavy. I'm shading, as I said, the left-hand side of the mountains a little bit as I finish up this piece, and I'm going to color in the flowers and add a little bit of color to the tree. I want you to notice how the white paper pokes through the mountain area, because I didn't meticulously fill in the mountains with the watercolor wash. And there are other elements in this piece where that happens. The white paper pokes through on the flowers or the ground area or the tree. And that is a really fun and elegant quality I appreciate about watercolor. And for a really fun and relaxing experience, try taking droplets of water and placing them on your paper, and then drop the color into the droplet of water and just let it dry. Really beautiful and just fun and relaxing way to create an art piece. I took a few days to create the piece I just showed you. I sat down every once in a while and just created water drops with color. It was very relaxing. There were a few spots that I bumped as they were drying and they bled, but when it was dry, I made dots with my white gel pen, and I feel like there's something I want to turn it into, but I just enjoy looking at it as dots. And for a fun experience that takes no skill and is mesmerizing and delightful, is to create shapes with your brush of water, and then drop the color or swipe the color in that water shape and watch it move and respond to the water surface. You can let it dry as it is, or you can sprinkle a little bit of salt on it and see what happens. You can also drop water into the colored shape as well. Watercolor has lots of ways it can be used, and I'll be posting some other videos with more watercolor exercises. I hope I've given you a couple of fun new ways to explore this medium, and please share any of the artwork you've created today with me. I would love to see it.
Thank you for joining us,
And have an artful day.